sales organizations that are 3 times more likely to have commercial success. We've seen 183% increase in disruption. There's actually a massive disconnect between the knowing and the doing. The number one skill and muscle that we're needing people to really build is their Welcome to the Rev Up Rebellion, the podcast for revenue leaders rewriting the rules of growth. I'm your host, Abbie White, and in each episode, we are going to bring you unfiltered conversations with disruptors, top-performing leaders, and real-world experts who will share their battle-tested insights. Welcome to my first solo episode. And what I thought I would do is take you a little bit behind the scenes on what I'm seeing in market. What I love about what I do for a living is I actually get to be really, really nosy and go behind the scenes of so many different businesses. Before any of the keynotes that I do or projects that I work on, you get really in-depth briefings as to actually really what's happening, warts and all. Now, trade secrets always stay behind closed doors, but what I wanted to talk about is actually one of the biggest themes that I'm seeing. And context for you, time of recording, I've just come off the back of a really, really big sales kickoff season. So it's given me a massive visibility really around where is the market at. The number one conversation for me that I'm having right now is how can we help our teams adapt and embrace change? Because whilst all my topics used to be very much around how do we develop your sales skills and go-to-market skills, and people were thinking much more along the lines of prospecting techniques. What's really become apparent to me is now the number one skill and muscle that we're needing people to really build is their adaptability. Now, when you look behind the scenes at actually some of the research on this, Gartner, for example, did their assessment of this year, what are the top 3 skills that sellers need to have to be successful? One of them was tactical agility. Given at the moment everything is changing so fast, we've seen 183% increase in disruption. How are your team adapting? Now, whether that's you're adapting to AI, the market, the economy, tariffs, competition, whatever internal changes and restructures, whatever it is, we're all having to adapt to some extent. And so what I'm seeing right now is the teams that are in a really healthy position and they're in a position to be able to capture growth, they are able to lean into the ability to adapt. The ones that are struggling right now that I'm seeing, there's almost an element of change overwhelm. There has been so much change that actually I just can't keep up, and I'm feeling a level and a degree of burnout. And we're definitely seeing that in the data coming through in relation to employee engagement and burnout as well. The other data point that I really like is Gartner have found that sales organizations that are adaptive by design are 3 times more likely to have commercial success. So the proof really is in the pudding. The rewards are there to be had. And from my lens, like I said, it's now become over 50% of the conversations that I'm having and really where the opportunity is at. And so what I wanted to do in this episode was break down 3 really highly practical ways that we can start actually helping our teams to adapt. I think there's 2 parts to this conversation. One, as revenue leaders, how are we helping our teams to adapt? And secondly, as individuals, I also think there's a level of personal responsibility of how we also leaning into how we need to evolve and adapt as well. So if I bring you to my top 3 takeaways, number 1, I came across this Japanese concept of wabi-sabi. And when I came across it, I absolutely loved it and it really resonated to me. So the concept of wabi-sabi is how do you embrace imperfection? If you've ever seen some of the Japanese pottery that has various different cracks, it's been broken, it's molded back together, and it's now become a fine art and they embrace the beauty in it. You look at Japanese buildings, they're designed to withstand earthquakes and they have to bend and flex with the changing of environments. Now, the reason that resonates with me on this conversation of adapting is too often what I'm finding is sales and go-to-market teams are saying, well, when we have X, when we have Y, when we have this tool, or when we finish this change, or when we have it more resources, or when we have more time. Now, I can totally relate to that. I catch myself having those conversations all the time. But actually, I think that the beauty is in how do we embrace the imperfection of the constant change and the new world that we're in, where we are continuously evolving. So I feel like this is a mindset shift of stop waiting until when, but start acting now. And I feel like that's helped teams be able to remove some of the barriers and potentially excuses and actually be able to continue adapting at the heat of the moment. The second one that is really resonating with me is Adam Grant's work. So Adam Grant, the US organizational psychologist, he talks in his book, Think Again, about how do you think like a scientist? A scientist has a hypothesis. If we do X, Y will happen. And I'm going to look at the indicators that it's working, and I'm going to look at the indicators that it's not working. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove my personal bias and I'm going to run the experiment. And so it's all well and good us saying, hey, teams, I want you to adapt. I want you to embrace change. I want you to embrace this new whatever it shall be. But in reality, the practicality on the day-to-day, there's actually a massive disconnect between the knowing and the doing. And what I love about the concept of think like a scientist is you can really practically embed it in teams. So to give you an example, my team, every Monday in our team meeting, we talk about what's one experiment that you're running. And everybody is doing it. This is not just for sales. This is all revenue generating teams. So my graphic designer will come back and report back what experiments she's been running, what she's seeing working, what she's not seeing working, and embracing that think like a scientist. So if you can imagine the 1% gains, the compound interest gains from every single person in your team starting to continuously test, try, and evolve, what happens is it starts to create a cultural shift. As an organization, we adapt. It is really part of our DNA and it becomes embedded. And talking about just one experiment a week, no matter how small it is, for me, it keeps the momentum going. And that's to me what makes the difference between we should do this and the practicality of it, because it's bite-sized, it's manageable, it's digestible, and I've got the consistency and the discipline every single week in my meeting to be able to reinforce it. So that's the second way I've been finding that in reality, we can help teams start to adapt. The third way I think is really, really, really powerful is Kaizen. If you've come across, again, another influence from Japan today, if you've come across the story behind Toyota, every single person in the business once a quarter had to put forward at least one idea for continuous improvement. That wasn't just the leaders and those who are in a leadership position. That was everyone from the factory floor, frontline, entirely across the business. It was really viewed as whoever's closest to the problem and closest to the work has the best insights. So there was that level of responsibility that every single person once a quarter would come up with an idea. Now, this wasn't just throwing ideas across the fence for other people to have to execute or deal with. When you put an idea forward, what you also had to do was take accountability and responsibility for executing on it. So that became the best filter for people to really, really, really consider the ideas that they put forward and which ones were the ones with the most merit to execute on. What I love about Kaizen, if you look actually behind the meaning of the word, it's about good change, positive change, and that level of continuous improvement. Again, how do you embed continuous improvement in reality? It was having that KPI and that metric that once a quarter you had to put forward the idea. It was ownership. It was every single level. And so these are the ways that I find actually bridge the gap between the great intention that we are going to adapt, we are going to embrace change, and actually the reality. Because the businesses right now that I think are growing, the businesses that are adapting, those are the ones that I think are going to see huge success. So from my lens, behind the scenes, working with businesses, I am seeing the number one superpower that we need to lead into is adaptability and building our adaptability muscle. Start now, start small, do bite-sized steps that you can actually manage. Make sure you have the consistency and the momentum and the discipline to execute. But the punchline is start now, start today. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe and follow so that you get our unfiltered conversations every single week.